Good evening, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth to another episode of Disguise Coverage, part of the Cover One Sports Network and the only podcast in existence, I promise to you, I swear to you, that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin. I am your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro2_ANT. Give me a follow on the old TikTok as well. Same exact handle, pro2_ANT. Pretty much use the TikTok for film clips and video breakdowns, similar to what the Twitter is, but in a little different way. So you're going to have to follow and find out. In tonight's episode of Disguise Coverage, you guys know how we do here in season on Disguise Coverage. We focus on the in-depth matchups that will decide the upcoming game for the Buffalo Bills. And on the back end of the show, we will get into stock up, stock down. But with it being about the quarter point of the season, even though I know it's an odd number of games now with the 17, but we're here at the quarter point, the normal quarter point after 4 games. Kendall Mirsky is going to join me, and we, instead of doing an individual level stock up, stock down, we're going to be looking at our top position groupings that are trending up and our top position groupings that are trending down for the Buffalo Bills after the rough quarter point of this season. Before that, Kendall and I will dive into the in-depth analysis and breakdown in terms of scheme and structure and X's and O's for the matchups that will decide Bills versus Steelers. But before we do that, very excited to bring on my guest for tonight's show, Mr. Christopher Carter from Locked On Steelers. Do you purposely go by Christopher? Because if you go by Chris Carter, people are going to think it's like Chris Carter.
No, Christopher is just my resume name. I'm totally fine with Chris. I am not. That's just what I put on paper and what I put on my Twitter account. But Chris is totally fine. And trust me, people do think I am Chris Carter. I literally got death threats when he said Ben Roethlisberger was a bad quarterback, and like people were saying, "Oh man, I'm going to find you. I know where you live." And I'm like, "Dog, first of all, it wasn't me. Second of all, get a life. It was just,
Second of all, bring it. Here's my address. Fight me. I'm ready. Let's do it." I appreciate you, man. I've followed you for a while. I tried to link up with you last year for Bills Steelers, but we couldn't make it happen. You are a very busy man, host of Locked On Steelers, and a multitude of other things, including covering, the Pitt Panthers. So introduce yourself to the fan base here, the viewers, who you are, what you do, because you got your hands in a lot, and it's all really quality.
I do have my hands in a lot. I host the Locked On Steelers podcast Monday through Friday, daily show. We on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, YouTube, everything you can imagine for free. We do that Monday through Friday. I write for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, our major newspaper here in the city of Pittsburgh. I cover Pitt athletics. So right now I'm writing a lot about Pitt football, gearing up for Pitt basketball. And then they got volleyball. Their women's volleyball team is really good right now. And both their soccer teams are being competitive. So that's always fun to cover. I also work for Channel 11, our WPXI, our local NBC station. I do fantasy football, high school football, and I talk about the Steelers with them. So like you said, I wear a lot of hats.
You do wear a lot of hats. I was going to try and make a joke about how you don't do anything, but I feel like it's just stupid at this point because it's so clearly the opposite. And yeah, I mentioned it to you offline. I appreciate you taking the time for me.
Absolutely.
Just with how busy you are. And so for folks who don't know, I'm going to ask Chris some questions about the Pittsburgh Steelers to kind of set the tempo and tone for this episode. But again, because he is, as you guys saw, has his hands in literally I feel like anything that exists in the city of Pittsburgh that's sports related, you're on it and you've got a hand in it. So I'm going to ask you these questions, get, your thoughts and insight, and then we'll get you on your way to do any one of the 75 other jobs that you probably have to do tonight.
Absolutely.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I guess just to lead off as we start going into this game, week 5 for the Steelers and the Buffalo Bills, what's the state of this Pittsburgh Steelers team? They come off of, I would probably say, a tough loss if you're the Steelers and that fan base to the New York Jets. Trubisky is out. Pickett comes in. I feel like he's getting kind of a bad rap because he had the 3 interceptions. I thought he showed some poise and some pocket presence. He stuck in the pocket, made a couple really good throws, established some rapport and some rhythm. But now it looks like they've handed the reins to him fully with him being announced the starter this week. Haven't had a great start to the season at 1-3. What's the state of this Pittsburgh Steelers team as they come into this game?
There's a lot of excitement and confidence in Kenny Pickett. It's not just how he plays in the field, it's how he carries himself on and off of it. As a person, I covered Kenny Pickett for 2 years, and in his last 2 years with Pitt football, that guy's a leader through and through. Like last year, Pitt lost a terrible game to Western Michigan, and it was setting them on the brink of not being able to get into the ACC championship. And Kenny Pickett called a team meeting. It was like straight out of Remember the Titans. Like, we're not doing this again. We're not losing like this to someone this bad. And Pitt went on to win all but one of their remaining games, got them to the ACC championship, won their first ever ACC championship, and Kenny Pickett broke Deshaun Watson's passing touchdown record for the ACC. So like, that he's that guy. And he doesn't have the most powerful arm. He's not the fastest. He's not the tallest, but he puts it together in a special way, and he sees the field so well. Louis Riddick, a former Pitt Panther himself over at ESPN, he said, last year, he said Mac Jones was his top quarterback. Why? Because he thought he saw the field the best. This year, he said that guy is Kenny Pickett. And truly, I do think that there is something special to him there. And you're right. Those 3 interceptions, if you go back and you watch them, like the all 22 and see the situations there, the first one, it was a good 50-50 ball to Chase Claypool that gave him a chance to box out a guy he was 6 inches taller than, and he just failed to do so and allowed it to get tipped, and that allowed it to get intercepted. The second pass he shouldn't have thrown. He admitted it, and I actually asked him about that after the game, and he said, I meant to throw that higher so that Pat couldn't get to it, and I need to do better at that. The third pass was a Hail Mary. He was just like, let's heave and pray, and he got it to the end zone. So there's that. But for Kenny Pickett, I think that, if you looked at the difference of play, the Steelers went from converting 1 of 6 third downs in the first half with Mitch Trubisky to 5 of 6 in the second half with Kenny Pickett. And in that the one that they didn't convert, he got on 4th down with a 4th and 1 QB sneak. Right. He sees the field well. He anticipates well. It's remarkable. There's a lot of excitement for that, but I will say this offense is still looking for an identity. And if you're asking where the Steelers are, they don't know who they are yet. This offensive line is still trying to figure it out. They're getting better each week, but it's, they're coming from a very low start. Najee Harris, I think, is working his chemistry with them. The receivers have been inconsistent at best. George Pickens has flashed a lot of potential, and they're hoping that from him, but there's a lot of potential with this group. There's a lot of excitement with this group, but they got to put it together. And on defense, right now, they're just trying to survive the injury rush. Minkah Fitzpatrick didn't practice on Wednesday. Terrell Edmonds is in the concussion protocol. Akella Witherspoon, their top corner, is looking out for the week. And Cam Sutton was limited in practice. Those are their 4 starting guys in the secondary. All 4 of them deal with injuries, and that's on top of T.J. Watt. He won't be back probably for another 2 or 3 weeks, I estimate, at best. So they're just trying to survive that, and I think that's right now. It's the defense trying to find a way to compete with those injuries, and the offense trying to find an identity even with a new quarterback.
It's really unfortunate for the Steelers. Like I just love good football and good football players, and you've got T.J. Watt, who, if not for Aaron Donald, you can even make the case if you wanted that T.J. Watt is the best defensive player in all of football, even if you love Aaron Donald. Like I wouldn't side-eye someone if they said that. That's how good he is. He's the best edge in all of football. Minkah Fitzpatrick, the Bills have 2 great safeties in Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. Poyer's playing out of his mind, but for me, on any given day, Minkah Fitzpatrick is the best safety in all of football with what he does and what is asked of him. So you've got such talent back there, and then you've got TJ Watt up front, and then you've got all these like smatterings of talent like Cam Heyward, and even the rotational pieces of what like Wormley brings, and you're trying to like put all these little things together, and your 2 horses that are carrying this defense to a degree and making splash plays to help overcome for the offense. It's really unfortunate to see them get nicked up with injuries. It just sucks for like the game of football, especially with how the year started. Like the offense isn't putting it together, and Minkah and TJ Watt are like, that's cool. We're just going to ruin Joe Burrow's day and put points on the board, take the ball away, and set this game up. So yeah, very interested to see what Watt's timeline looks like, and when he does come back, the injury status for everybody else this week. Let's stick with the discussion on the defensive line. TJ Watt obviously goes down. He and Alex Highsmith, I thought, were a really fun combo last year and coming into this year. I really like Alex Highsmith just on his own. And if you're sitting looking at where he's at right now, in the entire NFL, amongst everybody who plays defense, he's tied for 10th in pressures, tied for 2nd in sacks. He's 2nd amongst all edges in run stops. He has a 0.6 average depth of tackle, and then he's 4th in tackles amongst all edges versus the run. He plays the run, he plays the pass, he's got speed, he can go speed to power, he's got some technique. But TJ Watt goes down. Now he's vaulted and elevated to that number 1 guy on the outside. How has he fared in your estimation since TJ Watt has gone down, knowing that, he's got to carry the mantle?
Well, I think the big thing there is that Alex Highsmith, I talked to him a lot. He's a very smart guy. He's all about football. And if you watch these guys when both of them are healthy, whenever the team is doing something that's not involving the first team defense, they immediately go off and they start just chopping and working and doing this and doing that. And they're working with each other and they're going against each other. And like, you'll walk past them and you'll be like, hey guys, and they're like, hey, and then they'll get right back to it. It's just like, that's how focused he is. He definitely feeds off of TJ's energy, both on the field and practice, but he's definitely his own player too. Like, nobody can be just TJ Watt like that. It's just, he's very special, and he does so much to mask up other things in the defense. He's more than just an edge rusher. He stuffs the run. He looks for the pass. He backs up and stops to bat down the pass to create opportunities.
Or pick it off in midair.
Or pick it off like he did to Joe Burrow. I mean, it's just, he's ridiculous. Alex isn't all that, but Alex is very sharp. He's learned, he came in with really just a spin move in his rookie season. And then he learned how to counter off that spin move, how to make you think he's going to it. And then he rips to the outside. He's got you, out of position. He's a very smart football player who's learned to be better and better at his position. And he's a handful. Now, the thing is that if you double team Alex Highsmith, you don't have the same kind of problems you still have when you double team TJ Watt. But at the same time, sometimes you have to double team him, unless your quarterback is that slippery. Zachary Wilson, I thought, did a really good job escaping a lot of sacks last week. There were 2 times that I thought Alex Highsmith had him dead to rights, and he found a way to squirt out of that situation. And credit to him for that. But Alex Highsmith is beating guys a lot. He's getting past him. He has different moves, and he has 5.5 sacks on the season. The only guy with more is Nick Bosa right now. I think that he's getting to a really good place. But I think a big thing for this Steelers defensive front, they need TJ Watt back at some point. They also need their other guys to be healthy, to play together as a unit. Cam Heyward, I don't think has been at his best yet this year. I think that he's kind of still getting back to his full strength. Larry Ogunjobi, I think, has flashed at times, but also I think a big part of it is timing off of each other. It took the Steelers years to get the timing between Cam Heyward, TJ Watt, Bud Dupree, Stephon Tuitt, that crew. And then eventually they became the best pass rushing unit in the league. And heck, the Steelers have led the NFL in sacks for 5 straight years. But, that chemistry goes away when more and more people go away. And I think what you're seeing right now is a lot of the twists, the stunts, the trust that there is there. It's slower. It's not as reliable for these guys. And so they're trying to build that back. And I think that eventually they will, but it takes time to do that.
This Bills offensive line has been less than ideal, to put it in a nice way, when run blocking this year. They've been all right in pass protection, minus the game against Miami. But this Steelers front, not just even including TJ Watt, they come into this game banged up. Cam Heyward with elbow and ankle injuries, limited in practice today. Wormley, a rotational guy, limited as well. This front last year, along with Melvin Ingram, who's no longer a Steeler, who seems to just ball out against the Bills every time he plays against them, they took over that game really in the second half between Watt, Heyward, Ingram, Highsmith looked good. Like they just had, and Tuitt wasn't even like healthy for that game. Like
he didn't play at all last year.
No, he didn't. He was done. So they've got this unit that is known for having these horses up front. They gave the Bills such problems last year. How do you think this defensive line fares coming into this game, knowing how nicked up they are in an already nicked up group?
I mean, this defensive line, I think the biggest thing is if Cam Heyward plays, I think that they'll be back to speed. But right now, they're struggling to figure out, how to compensate for not having TJ Watt. And like, they're staying competitive. It's not like they're bad, but this roster was built on the premise that the defense was going to dominate games and create turnovers. And you saw it in the Bengals game. They went out there, caused 5 turnovers, even if they didn't cause all 5, and they were able to take away Joe Mixon. They forced Joe Burrow to kind of be one-dimensional at one point. They were able to, to say, hey, you're going to have to make some great throws consistently throughout this game to beat us. And at the same time, if you slow down for a second, our pass rushers get home. That hasn't been the case since. The first half of the Patriots game, I thought they were really sharp. And then since then, it's just been tiresome. And I think a part of that is the offense. The Steelers were hoping with Mitch Trubisky that they would not be in a situation where the defense is going out there 80 to 100 snaps a game. And, they were going out 80 snaps a game for three straight weeks. So, and I think that there's a bit of exhaustion on their part, and they kind of need a breather. But I think that's the biggest thing you're going up against right now. I don't know if it's that that the defensive front needs to get healthy. I think that they're I think that they're healthy enough even without TJ Watt that they need to be sharper than they are. But part of that's just going to be reps, timing, experience. It's stuff that I literally saw grow week to week with those other guys that were in the group. I think it's just going to take another sort of season where these guys figure out how to play off of each other to make that their future.
You hit on it already with what the kind of the role or expectation was for how this team was built. You have to rely on those horses like TJ Watt and Minka to take the ball away, and if you're Minka Fitzpatrick, literally like put points on the board with pick sixes, or at the very least set your offense up. The offense just a lot of inconsistent play, inability to string drives together multiple games. Trubisky not seeming comfortable in the pocket, not really willing to push the ball downfield or take chances, just playing very, very, very safe. He exits last game, like we talked about earlier. Kenny Pickett comes in. Again, just one game, small sample size. What do you expect the Steelers offense to look like with him at quarterback? He's got a little more mobility. As you mentioned, his vision is tremendous. He sees the field. He throws with anticipation. Obviously, like, excited to see him play with this team. The fans loved it. He gives a little more juice to this offense. What do you expect to see from like a scheme perspective with him?
I expect to see the Steelers calling similar plays, but for a lot of people that were saying, "Oh, Matt Canada is such a bad offensive coordinator, he doesn't know what call plays," I'd look at the all-22 or watch it from the press box at Acrisure Stadium, and I'd be like, "That guy was open, that guy was open, that guy was open," and it wasn't a situation where there was just nobody getting open, and Mitch Trubisky, it was just poor old Mitch Trubisky just in a bad spot. The Steelers were he just couldn't see the field. I mean, there was a really good cut up by a guy named Tyler Wise on Twitter. But like he put two plays,
two plays up. Yeah, it was almost like the same thing. And Pickett hangs in the pocket, takes the hit, completes it, and Trubisky, nope.
He didn't even see the three wide open guys over the middle part of the field. And some people say, well, those aren't the same plays and defenses. And like, bro, those are similar concepts, and those you still got to find the open man. I don't care what the play call is in that situation. But again, I think that was Mitch's biggest problem. This offense needs somebody to trust. I can tell you, if you watch like the after parts of plays over the first 3 weeks, you can see like people getting real frustrated. Like George Pickens, there were times he would just get so open, and then there would no target would come, and he would just like kind of just like throw his hands up and like what's going on? Like, just get me the football. Deontay Johnson against the Browns in a 2-minute drill. The Steelers are moving the ball, and all of a sudden, Mitch Trubisky just bails on the play and just hurls it over out of bounds. And Deontay Johnson's like, I was wide open for 20 yards. Mitch, what are we doing? And it's just those type of things were happening more and more often. And with Kenny Pickett in there, I think Mitch Trubisky's biggest thing is he wasn't a big leader. He wasn't a guy that was like, this is my offense. Let's go. Let's do this. Kind of laugh in the face of adversity type of guy. Kenny Pickett is that. That's why Mike Tomlin loved him. And I truly think that Steelers put a full smoke screen on when they were like, oh, I'm eating wings with Malik Willis, because that was a big deal during the offense.
Yeah, it was huge.
Off season. Everyone was talking about, oh, the Steelers never getting Malik Willis.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, it's like the answer was right in front of you. They liked this guy. For people don't know, the Steelers and the Panthers, Pitt Panthers, they train in the same building. They're just on two halves of the same building. They just work there. So like all year long, Mike Tomlin and the Steelers, they can look at Pitt's players, and they do look at Pitt's players. And there's times that they talk to Pitt's players, and they're just like, yeah, let's pick this guy's brain. So the wings part, like, maybe they hadn't eaten wings with Kenny Pickett, but they knew who he was, and they was like, we want that guy for our locker room. We want that guy. And that's what they want from him, is the leadership component, the guidance component, to say, hey, get out there, lead this group down the field. And you saw that leadership in this game. Again, 3 interceptions, that's fine, but he also ran in 2 touchdowns and was able to execute there. I also think that when he gets in the red zone, he gets more chances to work. Also, that game, he didn't have a single rep with the first team that week going into that game, and he hadn't had a rep with the first team in a while in practices. This is going to be his first full week. I'm interested to see how he's able to execute and flow within the offense when he knows that it's him that's going to be starting out there for every play.
Yeah, me too. Just from a pure football perspective, there are things to like with this Steelers offense. Like Deontay Johnson, tremendous route runner. I know he's had some dropsies issues, but has the ability to just pull out the spectacular catch, like seemingly at will. You mentioned Claypool with his size and explosiveness, although he doesn't at times always use it. Pickens is just this monster who does everything like a monster, catches like a monster, blocks like a monster, intimidating as hell. Yeah, he going back to Georgia and then even coming in, like I saw that one, the chip that he had this past week off, just rocks the corner. Like, that's regular for him. I really like Pat Freiermuth and what he adds as the tight end. Najee Harris is a stud, someone who I wanted the Bills to potentially take a swing at, even though you're not supposed to take a running back in the first round, blah, 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 blah. But some pieces that really could work for Kenny Pickett. And yeah, I'm excited to see what he does with a full week of practice and a full week of reps with these ones under his belt. Last question for you before we get you out of here. You know, you already hinted at several of the injuries for this secondary with Weatherspoon and Cam Sutton. Levi Wallace is also dealing with a foot injury. There's a chance like the significant amount of this starting group misses this game. What do you expect from this secondary? Because we've seen over the last several weeks, especially since that Titans game, defenses now are starting to challenge the Bills receivers more. Granted, they've had injuries, a multitude of them since the Miami game, but we're seeing teams trying to take away that space, press them at the line of scrimmage, not give them anything easy, whether it's, you know, the slants or hitches or stop routes or the free access and glance routes for RPOs. They're challenging these receivers. What do you expect to see from the Steelers in that regard? Do you still think they try and go with that, even though they're going to be, you know, severely shorthanded? What do you expect to see?
I mean, they'll try to challenge them. I mean, the Steelers are a group that they kind of expect, like, hey, listen, you got to go out there and do your job, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is that the Steelers' current defensive coordinator is Terrell Austin. Last year, he was their defensive backs coach, and he was the guy that was helping put things together on the back end. And he had a vision to create more and more mismatches and disguise. I mean, you guys are disguised coverage. That's what he really wanted to do. And he wanted to disguise coverages more. If you go back to the mid 2010s when the Steelers defense was struggling, oftentimes their coverages were very basic. It was like, hey, this is cover 2. Hey, this is cover 3. Hey, this is man. You know, and it was just like, as a quarterback, you could identify and attack it. Whereas when Minkah Fitzpatrick came in and they had all their guys healthy, they could disguise cover 2. They could hide cover 1. They could fake you out and make you think the middle's open. And then all of a sudden you're throwing to a robber safety of Minkah Fitzpatrick. And you're like, oh gosh, that's a problem. And that's where I think the Steelers have an advantage when they're fully healthy. But they're down right now. They're down, like you said. Levi Wallace is hurt. Cam Sutton is hurt. Ahkello Witherspoon is hurt. Minkah Fitzpatrick is hurt. Terrell Edmonds is hurt. Yep. And DeMonte KZ still on injured reserve. And he was the third, right? He was the third safety. I'm telling you, when they were in training camp and the three of them were healthy, the switches they were doing every single day was just wild. And I was like, cool, whoa. Group. And what Terrell Austin wants to do is he wants to fool quarterbacks. He wants to say, hey, the pass rush is coming, but if we can do these things behind it, they're going to have such a hard time. And that's what was confusing Joe Burrow. I know some people were like, oh, it was just a fluke game because of a long snapper getting hurt.
No.
They fooled that man. They studied him. They picked him apart. They took away what he liked to go to, and they were able to you know, make his life really rough in that game. And they also brought heat. You know, so I think in this game they're not going to be able to do as much. Even if Minkah is back, even if Terrell is back, it's the two safeties. I think that a big part of this is also having all of the corners there and and being able to trust them. Like, hey, we're calling out this. We'll go here, do that. Make sure this guy's there, and everyone be able to trust each other without bailing on their jobs and trying to play hero ball. And that's a problem that I think the Steelers might be running into sometimes if they're shorthanded and things. But again, we just got to see how, you know, who is healthy this week. When they are healthy, that's when the Steelers like to mix things up, and they will try to challenge your receivers all across the field.
Very well said, Chris. I wanted to stay true to my word of getting you in, getting you out, because you are a man of like 1,000. I was just like, I don't know if you know wrestling, but like Dean Malenko was the man of 1,000 holds. I was going to make a man of 1,000 but like jobs. Like, just, you crushed it as I had hoped you would.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just in case some people came in now, don't know, one more time, run it through what you do, where people can find your work. I always like to make sure, just for Bills fans who also like football, but just Bills fans in general, you should always want to stay up on all the other teams in the NFL, because every one of those teams is your enemy. And then it's also good just to know more about football. So I like to give good recommendations of people from other teams to follow. You're one of the best for the Steelers for me. So yeah, of course, man. So plug your stuff one more time, where people can find you, what you do, all that stuff.
Oh, first of all, I want to shout out to Bills Mafia, because I am friends with a lot of Bills fans. One of my best friends, Erin, she got married over the summer, and she's an awesome person. She introduced me to Bills fans. There actually used to be a Bills bar in Pittsburgh called Buffalo Blues, and on Sundays Like I didn't know this until I was of drinking age and going there, more frequently. Like on Sundays, they had a whole back room reserved for just Bills fans in Pittsburgh.
That's awesome.
And this was before Josh Allen. This was like, Tyrod Taylor, rough days. Like it was hard times.
Yeah, the dark times.
But the Bills fans, they would show up there, and whenever they'd score, you make me want to shout. They do that whole. I was with it. I was like, yo, this is cool. And there was one time I messed up. They were up 21-0 on the Patriots. And I'm like, they got this. They're going to whoop Tom Brady. And everyone says, no, Chris, what have you done? I'm like, what do you mean? They're winning. And
it's in the bag.
Game. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. So everyone leaving was like, this is your fault. This is your fault. So I love Bills fans, man. Y'all are intense. It's so much fun to hang out with y'all and watch football. So shout out to Bills Mafia. Y'all are a real fan group. Also, my boy Mike Pretch, he's a big Bills fan. But also, if you want to follow me and what I do on the Pittsburgh Steelers, Locked On Steelers, a podcast you can find just like this one: Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, YouTube. If you like this, like this video, check us out. You'll get all my previews. I actually did a preview video with Joe Marino that will be going up Thursday. So check
Locked
that out.
On Bills.
Yes, indeed. We do our crossovers, man. We like to.
Nice.
Like to talk. So
keep it
if
in
you
the
want to
fam.
see Joe and I bouncing off each other, that's our Thursday crossover episode on either of our channels. You go if you want to check out Pitt, I'm also there. Pittsburgh Post Gazette or post-gazette.com. You check that out. Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt all things. I'm writing for it there. Channel 11 WPXI. I do all sorts of things for them. Like my man has said, I do everything out here in Pittsburgh. I try my best. So check me out on all those different platforms, and of course, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Cutter Critiques just to see everything that I do.
Absolutely crushed it, man. And just one more thing, like Bills fans, you should pay attention to Pitt with Dane Jackson and DeMar Hamlin.
Yeah,
they have that similarity in defensive scheme. This could become a little bit of a pipeline there. So if maybe the Steelers thing is in your bag, you need to stay up on college programs. Pitt is crushing it. Chris has you covered there. Chris, again, I appreciate you fitting me in, taking the time, joining me. You crushed it. Have a good week. Enjoy your night. Enjoy the 1,000 labors that you have to perform, and I'll catch you in the Twitterverse.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you.
Later, man. Awesome guest. Awesome guest. Very happy to have Chris on for the beginning of this show. Give him a follow at Carter Critiques. Again, genuinely a dude who he asks the right questions at the right time, reports, covers everything on the Steelers, and then Pitt, as you mentioned, like everything that he does, he is a pro's pro. Give him a follow. He'll increase your knowledge of the game and the Steelers and Pitt. Just a good dude to follow in terms of a person and in terms of the content that he provides. Now we pivot. So a little different. Normally I have the guest on for about the first 45 minutes to an hour. Wanted to squeeze Chris in for as much as he could. So now we're going to pivot, but don't worry, because we're going to pivot with guest as well. Kendall Mirsky of the Cover One film. Had such a good opportunity, and Kendall just, let's try it again. No, I appreciate you.
I love that.
Joining me there. I didn't. It wasn't planned. It was just happened on the spot. Kendall, you and I rode together last night on the Cover One film room, sans Mr. Eric Turner. Really good fun episode last night. We crushed it. I appreciate you double dutying and joining me tonight here on Disguise Coverage as we, break down some matchups, some stock up, stock down at the quarter mark. Just a lot of thoughts and feelings and all this kind of stuff when it comes to Bills Steelers, and kind of get your take on this as we come into this game. Bills Steelers, as Chris mentioned here, the Steelers, as much as the Bills are wounded, the Steelers are wounded everywhere. They're starting a rookie QB. They're in like a rebuild, but not really a rebuild. Right. A lot of murkiness. Where's your head at for this game overall as you come into it? Do you think this is a walk in the park for the Bills? Do you think, like I labeled it as a get right game because I think this is the type of game where you kind of tweak some things and improve some things and get back on the right track for the Buffalo Bills. But the Steelers are always competitive. They're sneaky competitive against the Bills. Where's your head at as we come into this game?
I think that's that last point of how they're competitive against the Bills and how their defense is really it's built in a way where it's going to test the Bills offense, because we've talked about that. Deficiency on the Bills offense is the offensive line, and the strength of that Steelers defense is the defensive line. Yes. Obviously injuries throws a wrench in a lot of that, but still come back to that idea. Sure. Is this a get right game? I think so, because even with the injuries, even without the injuries, I think the Bills are the better team and they have the advantage in that regard. So they can kind of work on some things in that way. But there's a lot of things that they need to work on to get better for the longevity of this season and use this game as a stepping stone or even a measuring stick for some position groups and kind of assess like what can we do against these teams that could give us these challenges down the road, teams that are going to give us the challenges on the back end, like disguising coverages like Minkah Fitzpatrick does, or on the front end, like compressing the pocket from the interior with Cam Heyward, stuff like that. It allows you to extrapolate and project it throughout the season against future opponents and kind of learn where you need to adjust throughout the season or where you may be able to stay the same because things were successful.
Very well said. I wanted to pull up, I can't resist shout outs about the tree. I'm really proud of it. As everyone knows, we change the tree every month. This will be the last month of the little tree because come November, we go to the bigger tree as we ramp up for the holidays. Yeah, I'm very excited for that. But this tree, again, shout out to my wife. She crushed it. The purple and black garland, the little jack-o'-lantern lights, I picked those out myself, but it was, her idea and her impetus, and we got some ornaments. Got a lot of good shout outs for the tree last night. As everyone knows, I just do this show so I can show the tree. The show is secondary to the tree. And I also wanted to shout out Andrew for this, calling it the hollow tree. That's good. Very well said. Very well said, Andrew. Yeah, this is a game where you see how Pittsburgh comes into it limping. The Bills come into it limping as well, but obviously in a much better state. And then you have this comment or a question from Andrew as well saying, what's the expectation from Pitt given the Bills' history with rookie QBs like Mills last year, for example? I don't think if Trubisky was the guy, I don't think it changes too much in terms of expectation of who's favored in this game. Pickett seems like he's the better option for this team right now. The team just seemed juiced and energized once he came into the game. The fan base definitely did, but we saw nice pieces from this offense. As I mentioned in the lead-in, he threw with poise. He threw with anticipation. As Chris talked about, he sees the field really well. He does all like the little quarterback from the neck up type of things really well. He's got good awareness. Even the fake slide for the touchdown that he had at Pitt, that still shows like really cool awareness for you to be running.
Even though it's illegal now,
yes, it is illegal because of him, but that's like some sneaky awareness to be like, let me fake this and do this. Like I've never thought of that. And apparently no one else has ever, because when he did it, everybody was just like, what just happened? Like, what do we do? But that expectation there with what the Bills have done against rookie quarterbacks, with how Leslie Frazier schemed up this defense against Lamar Jackson to slow down that Ravens offense and slow down Lamar, you have to think the pendulum is heavily in favor of the Buffalo Bills going into this game, which makes me very nervous to say because I am extremely superstitious and paranoid at all times. But to Andrew's question, I think the expectation is that they're going to make life hell for Kenny Pickett, which makes you want to just lean more into this Bills defense having another game where they continue to maybe, I don't want to say pad stats, but they continue to show why they are one of the best defenses in the NFL. And there's just that piece that, it kind of creates uncertainty, but it also kind of adds more confidence, but then also adds variables. I expect them to perform well against Kenny Pickett, but again, no sample size. We don't know who he is. We don't even really know the identity, like Chris said, of what the Steelers offense is going to be in general. They're still trying to find it, let alone coming into this game. Do they try to play unencumbered? And they're like, you know what? We're taking shots. We're throwing the ball downfield to Pickens and Deontay Johnson and Claypool, and let's see what we can do. Like, how does that pair with the running game? There's a lot to really dive into as we set the table for this episode. And that's what we're going to do right now in this next segment. Kendall, you and I are each going to give our top 2 game-deciding matchups for this Bills-Steelers game. You know the drill. Could be as high level or as granular as possible. Could be individuals. Could be an entire side of the ball. Could be position groupings. Anything and everything from your combination of film analysis and advanced metrics. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Good. I'm glad. But before we do that, psych! Gotta drop the love for the sponsor, One Pie Pizza, aka the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. That is not hyperbole. That is not exaggeration. That is not me shilling out for the sponsor. Delicious cup and char pepperoni, fantastic sweet sauce recipe, a great cheese to sauce ratio. It's just everything about it is perfect, legitimately. And they make their own homemade blue cheese. I sometimes try to figure out if I would just drink the blue cheese on its own. That's how good it is. Everything they make legitimately is phenomenal, and they're good people as well. As I mention all the time, a lot of initiatives to better the community, partnerships with different organizations and groups and charities. They're good people making great food. Online menu can be found in the episode show notes here on YouTube or any one of the podcasting apps or platforms. Go and get yourself some One Pie Pizza and taste the best pizza in Buffalo, hands down. Get yourself some. Football season is pizza season. Also, every season is pizza season because pizza is delicious and should be enjoyed by everyone at all times. Also, if you're here, we're starting to get more people are starting to come in. If you are enjoying this episode, please, and thank you, drop a like on this episode. A like is the lifeblood of live streams and affecting the algorithm here on YouTube. So if you're enjoying this content and you're here watching live, please, and thank you. Drop a like on this video. If you're watching later, please drop a like as well. It goes a long way and is tremendously appreciated by myself and the entire team. Kendall, no more psychs, no more jokes, no more games, no more tomfoolery. No, well, there probably still will be tomfoolery, but I digress. We're going to go from 2 to 1. So give me your number 2. Yep. We're gonna save the main event for the main. Give me your number 2 game deciding matchup for the Buffalo Bills versus the Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's going to be how the Bills attack the young offensive line of the Steelers, and specifically those bookend tackles. Dan Moore Jr. and Chukwumu Okorafor. Yeah, I
can't believe you even tried to go with it.
I mean, it's all vowels, but I should get there. Like I should be able to get it.
It's tough.
Those two guys, they've been starting for the Steelers. They started last year as well, but this has been a young group for 2 years now. They've been really reworking this, and they've had a lot of time to gel in terms of what they're working on under Canada, and it just hasn't gelled to this point, like Chris was talking about. So it's tough for them, but obviously. Think about it from the Bills' perspective. You have to take advantage of those matchups. You have to take advantage of them in pass protection, and you have to take advantage of them in run stops. So, obviously, these are 2 young bookends. Combined to this point through 4 games, they've allowed 1 sack and 10 pressures, which isn't a ton, but it's still, like middle of the pack towards lower end tackles in the league. And with a rookie signal caller this week, obviously in Pickett, getting pressure on the quarterback is a fast track key to victory. It's just going to make life easier for the Bills secondary. It's going to make life easier for the offense, getting their offense on the field as much as possible. All of that. It dominoes into an easier key and path to victory. So by increasing this, the pressure, whatever, games, stunts, or just straight rush and taking advantage of them, you increase the chances of these turnover-worthy plays or inaccurate throws from Pickett. I understand, like you just highlighted with Chris, Pickett has much more poise in the pocket and understanding of, okay, I just got to get that ball out quickly, eat whatever's coming at me, but I have to get the ball out quickly and let my wide receivers do something with the ball in their hand. You have to keep putting pressure on a rookie and make him feel uncomfortable. And the Bills have been good at this. Obviously, I forgot who already put up the comment,
Mills.
But the Davis Mills comment, like that's the idea. You want to keep putting pressure on that rookie and make life difficult for them. And obviously doing that, like I said, the domino effect of, getting the offense on the field more, giving momentum to the defense, giving them confidence, all of that stuff. But furthermore, I also want to look at like the run game specifically. Dan Moore has been really, really struggling in run blocking situations. PFF has him graded as a sub 50 grade right now in run blocking scenarios.
I can't believe you're using a grade.
I know, right? I got to be careful with that. But I supplemented it with SIS has him as the 10th in run blown block percentage right now amongst all tackles in the league. All tackles, even ones that have like 2 rush snaps. So it's a rough look for him right now. But you think about it in terms of like alignment. We've been seeing Von Miller go from side to side, but I feel like we've seen him a lot on the front side of plays where quarterback can see him getting pressure on him, and Greg Rousseau is on the left tackle. Greg Rousseau on a left tackle who's struggling in run blocking scenarios just sounds like a way that the Bills can really mitigate the effects of Najee Harris. So kind of supplement that with obviously what they can do in terms of those edge rushers getting pressure on the quarterback and, put the sum all together. And hopefully that comes out to a victory for the Bills defense, continuing to put pressure on that offense, make them stay behind schedule, make them have to work for first downs as hard as they can to go get them, make them earn that first down, and hopefully you can get your offense on the field more often.
I'm in a similar boat. I went more of like higher level and just thought like how the Bills play Kenny Pickett in general, because I like to go more specific. I operate with specificity, but there's just no sample size with what he is at this point and what this offense is going to be. And like I mentioned, the weapons, I find the weapons so intriguing for this Steelers team. Like if you had, I'm not saying Kenny Pickett isn't competent because we genuinely don't know at this point, but if you had a competent quarterback, you could do a lot worse than the Steelers weapon groups. Deontay Johnson, Pickens, Freiermuth, Claypool. I know Claypool is as a person, and he hasn't, I don't think, reached anywhere the ceiling that people thought he was going to have given his frame and physical measurables. But there's some things to like there. And then Najee Harris, I still love Najee Harris.
Yeah,
dude is a tank. Yes, he's a better receiver than people realize and give him credit for. From a weaponry standpoint, there are things to work with. If Kenny Pickett is the guy going forward, you've got Deontay Johnson under contract. You got Pickens in his rookie year. You got Najee Harris with that 5th-year option. Potentially he's in his 2nd year, depending on what happens with Claypool, if he works out, yada, yada. You've got some pieces to like and work with and operate with. And Trubisky just was not taking advantage of them. Like Chris said, like you had guys open. A lot of it was and I didn't think he played this way in Chicago. He just seemed very like scared and very overly safe. Make a mistake. Yes, almost like he was just like, I just need to hang on to the spot. I just need to hang on to the job. Like it looked like he looked stressed out there. And then you'd see him get on the move and make a throw, and you'd be like, whoa, that was a hell of a throw. And the next time he drops back to pass and he just won't pull the trigger. He limited that offense, as sad as it makes me to say.
They hit glass ceiling like right off the bat.
Yeah, and I just don't like knocking like players in general, but especially ones who seem like they're good dudes like Trubisky. But it seemed like he was really hindering that offense. And I don't want to say the training wheels came off when Pickett came in, but you just saw it just felt like everything took a lift, and there was a little bit more levity to this offense. And Pickett was super charged up. Again, it's his debut. He's playing in front of like the home crowd in Pittsburgh, but also the same fans pretty much that he played in front of in college. He seemed geeked up and juiced up. He's got some mobility. I think you add that more fearless mentality combined with the leadership that Chris talked about and who he is as a player and as a quarterback. Yes, I think he does. And I think he's also, despite the fact that he's a rookie, I don't think he's going to be scared to take shots. I'm not saying that he's going to pick the Bills defense apart and he's going to be throwing lasers and being surgical all over the field. But I think if he's got like a one-on-one ball with Deontay Johnson or Pickens, he's going to throw it up and he's going to see what happens. Like, I don't think he's going to be afraid to try and fit the ball into tight windows or take those one-on-one opportunities and push the ball downfield and potentially stress this defense in a variety of ways. And then you pair it with, who this offense is overall. Again, I didn't want to get too much into who this offense was because everything that we've seen has been them under, Trubisky. But if you're looking at them from a DVOA perspective, they are sitting there at 25th in offensive DVOA, 26th with the pass, 18th for the run. But their offensive line stats, their stuffed rank, which is the percentage of runs where the running back is tackled at or behind the line of scrimmage, they're 5th. And they're at 12%, and the teams at number 1 are only at 11%. So they haven't, cleared lanes for Najee Harris and Warren, who has some juice to his game and some pop. They're not opening up runways and clear wide open lanes, but they're getting enough push that they're able to kind of move the ball. They're not falling into, 2nd and 9, 2nd and 10. It's 2nd and 7, 2nd and 6, maybe at best, but they're still able to churn out some yards. And they do have a physicality element that can mash a little bit. Yeah. If they get anything established on the ground, anything, all of a sudden you got Kenny Pickett under center. You got the play action game. Maybe you get some one-on-one opportunities to George Pickens and you throw the ball up. He and Pickens had some good chemistry already.
Again, I think he was the highest targeted player once Pickett came in the game. It was him and Freiermuth.
Yep. And they both put up numbers, and that's an area too, right? Like if Edmonds is banged up, like the injury report suggests, Freiermuth eats over the middle Does the middle become open a little bit more? How do the Bills choose to defend Kenny Pickett? I think everything comes down to how they play Kenny Pickett. I think this offense goes more as he goes than it does Najee Harris, because I think of how they're going to kind of turn some dials with Kenny Pickett coming in. And so again, I think that encompasses a lot, like how the Bills obviously, are able to, fit the run and get the pass rush. And that's going to continue to be a thing, right? Like, can they continue to rush 4, get pressure with 4? As you mentioned, there are some leaky, issues up front with that Steelers offensive line. If the Bills can get pressure with 4 and drop 7 into coverage, they're going to have the advantage every single week, let alone in a week against a rookie quarterback who, what are the Bills going to do? Like, all jokes aside, not just because it's the name of the show, but they're going to disguise coverage, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, simulated pressures, creepers, stunts, twists, bluff pressure, mug the A-gaps, drop, mug the A-gaps, bring everybody, mug the A-gaps, bring 4, but which 4? When did they bring the 4? Where are they coming from? So on and so forth. I think this game is advantage Bills defense. I think that's clear. But depending on the play of Kenny Pickett, that's going to determine how much of an advantage they have. And also, again, I wasn't just saying it because Chris was here. I'm very interested to see what dials they turn up because I like some of the weapons they have. And if you've got a quarterback who isn't afraid to sling it and who's got some, confidence and some moxie to his game, maybe he uncorks a few and we get some fireworks. And when you've got athletes like George Pickens on the outside, Claypool had that circus catch last year in Buffalo. Like, you've got some physically imposing dudes on the outside and then a crafty, speedy route runner in Deontay Johnson, plus Freiermuth working in the middle, extremely athletic tight end.
A lot of weapons to cover up.
Yeah. Who knows what you could get? Who knows what you could get? So very similar from us on our
one way or another, it all comes back to Pickett. Even though mine started with the offensive line, it got to Pickett. Yeah.
Yes. Everything connects. Everything connects. Full circle, just like the film last night. All right, I'm interested to see what your number 1 is. What do you got?
It's a little bit like asterisk filled because of the injury report, but it's Cam Heyward. I mean, like,
okay.
I really I
that's
still
also
have,
related to my first point as well. So this is very funny.
So it's just like battle scars from last year and how much he just absolutely wrecked the game last year in week 1 against the Bills. And I think with the struggles that we've seen from the Buffalo Bills and their interior offensive line, my eyes immediately shift to the Steelers' interior defensive line. And I mean, it's all kind of dependent on how they decide to line guys up. And with the injury report, like if Heyward's playing, where Ogunjobi lines up, like how often they're using Alualu, all of that stuff. But all of those guys come into this. But if Heyward is healthy, my eyes are squarely on, who is the guy matching up against Heyward, and do we have to double him? Are we going to win one-on-ones against him? Because I think that's unlikely in the run or pass game. But like, what is the scheme to try and mitigate his effect on the offense? But ultimately,
because he had a day last year, like I mentioned with Chris, granted they had Watt and Ingram had a day as well, but Heyward was just, no matter who you put on Cam Heyward inside, dominant. And I think that's also, I don't think that's a knock against the Bills last year, even when he's banged up, but especially when he's healthy. Cam Heyward is legitimately one of the best defensive players in football. Dude is a monster.
Yes. I think he kind of gets slept on in that way a lot.
He does, because he's an interior defensive lineman that doesn't play with flash. He still gets sacks and pressures, but he doesn't do it in a way that makes everyone go.
He's got an awesome combination of power and like
tenacity,
nimble.
But like
he's kind of nimble. Yeah.
You told me that, all jokes aside, if you told me that, like, oh yeah, like when he was little, he did ballet for 10 years, I'd be like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because he's very light on his feet. He's got good footwork. Like, you don't see him. He's not lumbering and laboring about for a man of his size and play style. Like, he's really special to watch.
Yeah. So obviously we talk about it a lot when we're talking about the Bills and their interior defensive line and how interior pressure is very, very disruptive because firstly, I mean, interior pressure, it's always in your field of vision as a quarterback. So it's easiest to be hurried by interior pressure because you can see it and it's going to affect your timing and where you want to maneuver in the pocket, all that stuff. And that's the second point. It forces you to maneuver around the pocket. And if you're an interior defensive lineman, Cam Heyward, and you get interior pressure, is this going to feed Josh Allen right into Highsmith if Highsmith also wins his one-on-one? And that's the idea, you know? All it takes is two guys, Highsmith and Heyward, winning their one-on-one on the same play, and Josh Allen decides to maneuver towards the side of the Highsmith or if it's Malik Reed, whoever it is that wins their one-on-one opposite of Heyward, that's the idea of interior pressure. So it can obviously impact things at a very high level for the quarterback in the pass game. But obviously we've been talking about the Bills offensive line and how they've really lacked getting that push off the line of scrimmage in the run game against opposing defensive lines. So I think this will be a really good measuring stick opportunity for them in that regard. And I mean, I've brought this back up, the injury idea of, if Heyward's even going to play.
Yes.
If he's not, it's still a great measuring stick opportunity against Ogunjobi and Alualu. Those are still two guys that know what they're doing on the interior, definitely play with a lot of power. And if you can create push against them, you can kind of reevaluate and reassess what the Bills are doing on the interior of the offensive line towards creating push and creating alleys in the run game. So I think really the Bills interior offensive line versus the Steelers interior defensive line, with the spotlight being on Cam Heyward and if he will or will not play.
I'm almost in lockstep with you. I've got my number one matchup is the Bills O-line versus the Steelers D-line in both the pass and the run. Again, we'll lead with Heyward. So for those who don't know, he was limited in practice today with an ankle and an elbow injury. I do think he plays. I feel like he's that type of guy. Like, he has to be missing like a limb to not play.
Yeah, he's a warrior.
Yeah, he really is. And he's the type of guy too who, like, you could be like, oh man, he's playing this game like with a broken arm. I'd be like, he's still probably going to dominate. Like, he's going to like use part of the broken bone to like stab someone and like still get pressure. Like, he's just a monster up front.
Slap someone over the head, swim around him, get
right? Just like knock him out. Like, just he can do so much up front. Wormley was also limited, as I mentioned again, with that ankle. They're banged up on that defensive front. But what I like that you mentioned to and alluded to, we're going to get answers in some form or fashion either way, again, for this Bills offensive line. If those starters or those regulars do play, we get to see that matchup, right? If they don't, how did the Bills perform against, the quote-unquote backups from the Pittsburgh Steelers? Either way, regardless of what happens with the health of those guys up front, I want to touch on Alex Highsmith again, someone who I think is really coming into his own as a complete edge player. Starting with him as a pass rusher, a variety of moves. Chris talked about when he came out of Charlotte as a rookie, he just kind of had that spin move. But now he's packaging. He's got a cross chop. He can swipe and beat the hands quickly around the edge. He's got a jab step. He can cut inside. You see him operating with plan and purpose in everything he does. He sets up his moves well. He's able to create soft edges. He can attack shoulders. He's right now, like, again, it's a shame that TJ Watt is out because I think Alex Highsmith is like a beautiful number 2 to TJ Watt. But now that he's the number 1, how do things shift? Because he's going to get that attention and he doesn't have, he's not Robin anymore. He has to be Batman. How does he function in that world? But up until this point, again, and TJ Watt's been out since week 1 against the Bengals. Again, Alex Highsmith, he's tied for 10th in the entire league in pressures. He's tied for 2nd in sacks in the entire NFL. He's 2nd amongst all edges in run stops from a volume perspective. He has a 0.6 average depth of tackle, and he's 4th in total tackles amongst edges, again, in run defense. He plays the run, which you have to in Pittsburgh. They don't have anybody just come off the edge and rush. Nobody's just like a pass only or a run only. Well, maybe a run only kind of guy, but nobody's a pass only kind of guy in Pittsburgh. Highsmith's really starting to put things together and become more of a complete player on the edge. Yeah. We've seen the Bills' struggles at right tackle. I know you and I were talking offline on some less than favorable numbers for Quessenberry. When he stepped in for Spencer Brown, we've seen some things with Spencer Brown already that I was worried about coming in. It's that roller coaster effect. He's got high highs and low lows, and his low lows are really bad. He's getting beat within, it seems like, a quarter of a second. Does Highsmith, play on that side and try and attack the right tackle, whoever it is? It's got to be Spencer Brown this week, knock on wood. How does Spencer Brown hold up? And then again, if you have to allocate resources to help against Alex Highsmith, are you able to allocate resources for Cam Heyward?
Right.
Because yes, TJ Watt is out 1,000%.
And it helps a lot for the Bills.
Yes, it helps tremendously. But Heyward is a force. And if you've got interior force and then exterior force coming from the outside from Highsmith, again, I just really like what Highsmith does. It is a complete player. His athleticism, speed to power, burst, technicality, hand technique, leverage. and he has the mental side of the game as well, as Chris alluded to earlier. So some really good pieces there. I like what Highsmith does. And this offensive line in general, I think they've been, we know they've been better in pass protection than they have in the run. But these run numbers just continue to struggle me. And continue to stress me, not struggle me. That's not a word. Well, it is, but it's not proper in this sentence.
No, not grammatical.
No, not grammatically correct at all. I also want to see how the Bills run against this front. Coming into this game, the Buffalo Bills are 24th in power success at 56%. Power success, for those who don't know, is the percentage of runs on third or fourth down with 2 yards to go or less that achieve a first down or a touchdown. These also include runs on first and goal or second and goal from the 2-yard line or closer. They also include quarterback runs. They're 21st in stuff percentage. Again, percentage of runs where the running back is tackled at or behind the line of scrimmage. Bills offense, rushing DVOA, they're 31st in yards.
Sounds about right.
Not great. In rushing yards for just their running backs. These next stats are just for running backs. 27th in rushing yards by running backs. 24th in yards after contact by running backs. 19th in yards per attempt by running backs at 4.3. This is one that ties into something, Kendall, you and I have talked about all offseason. 23rd in running back runs in terms of broken tackle plus missed tackle per attempt at a total of 9.5. Zach Moss is at 12.5%. Okay, broken tackle plus missed tackle per attempt percentage. Devin Singletary is at 11.8. Last year, for the entire year, amongst all running backs with at least 50 carries, Devin Singletary had the 4th highest broken tackle plus missed tackle percentage at 21.3.
Yeah, just nutty.
He's almost a full 10 percentage points less in broken tackles plus missed tackles per attempt in the run. And you're kind of seeing it. That he showed it in week 1. And I don't know if it's been like a sticky field or the weather in week 3 against Miami or the rain this week. That same type of elusiveness and the proverbial make a man miss in a phone booth type of agility that he has, and that's been his calling card, really. We haven't seen it these last couple of weeks.
But I don't think that has anything to do with him. I don't think that means, like, you hear that drop off from a 10% drop off. You don't sit here and go, oh yeah, motor, like, he can't do that anymore. The wheels have fallen off type of thing. He got worse over the offseason. What's the one thing that's changed? It's the O-line. Where is he having to force that missed or broken tackle? Is it closer to behind the line of scrimmage, 3 yards past the line? Where is that happening? And I think that's where you can start to form that narrative on, or the root cause of why that 10% has happened.
And that ties into the larger point for me of, I said it on Cover One Football Weekly, I think last week or the week before, maybe this week. I don't remember. We've done so many episodes of so many things. Right now, at this very point, the offensive line isn't good enough to elevate the running backs, and the running backs aren't good enough to elevate the offensive line. And you coined the phrase that I think is just perfect. You're in this negative feedback loop where neither is good enough to elevate the other. If one messes up, it wrecks the other one. And you're just living in this negative feedback loop. And
they both have to be right if you want to be right.
And that's so tough. It's very similar to a pocket, passing quarterback today. You can live that way, but everything has to be solid. You have to be on time with your drop. The receivers have to be on time with their routes. The offensive line has to hold up in protection. You have to read your coverages at the right time. The receivers have to be seeing the same thing that you're seeing. So many things have to go right in order for you to win as a pocket passer. And that's what it seems like is happening with this run game for the Buffalo Bills. And I really think how this, with how banged up their secondary is, right, for Pittsburgh, how the Bills' offensive line performs against the front in pass protection, I think will dictate more of this passing game than the coverage versus the weapons aspect for the Buffalo Bills. So I think that dictates the passing matchup, whoever wins that from a pass rush and pass protection standpoint. But then also, I want to see what this Bills run game does. This is another week where you have an opportunity to kind of build some things in that regard. They don't have to be a run-first team, but they need to start to see some success on the ground. And against a team that does not want to give you that in the Pittsburgh Steelers, who may be banged up, who might be missing some studs, but even if they have them, they're going to be a little injured. Can you take advantage? What do you lean on? What are you able to do? Because again, up to this point, we've just seen this negative feedback loop between the offensive line and running backs in the run game, neither elevating the other. And everything just seems so hard. Like it just seems like they can't get anything going. There's very little push there is penetration at the same time, which is like, usually it's one or the other. Like, well, they're getting pushed back, or well, they're giving up penetration. They're giving up
Three
both.
guys are giving push, and then there's also a fourth guy that's in the backfield.
It's just like, it's just not good at all in any way, shape, or form. And against a team that you may have the opportunity, based on what the Steelers offense does, you may have the opportunity to possess the ball a lot if you are the Buffalo Bills offense in terms of, number of drives. Can they get anything going? It seems like they'll have an opportunity from a sample size perspective to run the football and kind of generate some things on offense. What are they able to put together? And I don't want to disrespect the Steelers or make anyone look past this game, because I'm definitely not. Again, I'm too paranoid and superstitious to do that. Mm-hmm. But some real games are going to start to come up on the docket as we move forward in this regular season and start to push into the playoffs. How long does it take for this running game to get something going? How long does it take for this offensive line to have some chemistry? How long do you think, as Y comes in right now and says, hope the running game will improve after the bye? I hope, but so much of it could, they could gel this week and it could be sweet. They could gel by week 15 and it could be sweet. I genuinely don't think there's like a predictive measuring stick right now for what this Bills run game is, because it's sloppy in a lot of ways, like poor technique, poor execution, a lack of identity. And at the crux of it all are the running back groups and the offensive line groups, neither of them being able to elevate the other. And like you said, it just makes them both have to be right in order to gain success. And that's like a very hard thing to do. Like, look at the most successful run the Bills have had this year, right? That Zach Moss run in Miami. Granted, the offensive line and McKenzie executed by washing things down. Yeah. But that run happened because Zach Moss made a play. He made a read, bounced it outside, won a one-on-one matchup, and then took it up the sideline. The best running play this year from a yardage perspective was from a really great individual effort from Zach Moss. And then the other ones after that were some really great scheme on those surge motions from the Shanahan playbook in week 1 against the Rams. That was like, okay, cool. Like, I like what they're adding here, but what do you have? Week 1, it was the scheme was winning and leading to success. Week 3, the best run for the Bills was just an individual playing above it and making a play. That's how they're living. Either the O-line has to crush it or the running back has to be amazing. And it's so hard to have that be a sustainable thing.
Bingo. And yeah, that's the thing. And that's why I think you labeled this a get right game in that way, because you want to use this game as that. I don't want to call it a practice game. Like you said, like, you don't want to look at this game oh, okay. You
can't look past anyone.
Exactly. But you have to acknowledge that, this opponent is the Steelers. They're kind of reeling. They've had a tough start to the season. They're already on their rookie quarterback. They're already trying to evaluate him. Your next opponent is the Chiefs. Use this game for what it is. Use it as an opportunity to test some things out, maybe tweak some things in the run game. And that's why I think it is apt to call this a get right game. Even if you don't do those things in the run game and you are just overall dominant in this game, you feel as a team that you got right. You got back on track and everything. It seems like it's steered in the right direction.
Yeah, you need some kind of something to come out of this game and be like, that was cool. Let's try and do more of that. Something. Again, as you head into this can't be the motive, but this is just like a thought that's in the back of my head. Like, as you go into Kansas City next week, where
exactly you need some confidence, something like leading into that.
And you know how much of a game, granted it's not a playoff game, but you know how much that game is going to be talked about and how much the players are immediately going to remember and think, no matter how many of them tell you like, oh, we're past last year. It is what it is. Like, how many of them are sitting there thinking 2 years in a row, our season ended in Kansas City last year, it should not have. Emotions are going to be high. That usually affects performance. We're going to see what happens. Like, that running game has to get going, and it's tied. I see some questions coming through asking about, things with the offensive line and individual players. I'm going to dive into it a little more because it's involved in my our segment later as we start to dive into that segment. Yeah. All right. Now, Kendall, we switch. Stock up, stock down. What I've done here on Disguise Coverage for the first, 3 weeks. So before this, week 4 episode, kind of following into week 5. I don't know numbers. It is what it is. Done it in stock up, stock down from an individual performance, coming out of the most recent game. What do these individual players look like? Who's trending up? Who's trending down? But what we're doing tonight, Kendall and I, we're looking at the Bills' position groups on both sides of the ball and giving our top 2 for which position groups are trending up and which position groups are trending down for the first quarter of the season. Yes, I'm going to say it now just because I know somebody's going to be like, there's 17 games now in a season. 4 isn't like the real quarter. We're still counting it as that. I don't care if there's an odd number of games now. So through this first quarter of the season, what position groups are trending up? What position groups are trending down, and why? For those of you playing at home, you know how much we love engagement here on Disguise Coverage. We would love for you folks to play along. The chat has been very active tonight. So who or what is trending up for you and why? As always, comments that, tickle our fancy, we'll bring up. Super chats always get priority, as always, once again. Always like to make this as interactive and engaging as possible. Ronald, this is the best one. Ronald just says injuries stock up. That's it. Done.
It's true. I mean,
injuries are stock up. Absolutely. But yeah, so those of you playing at home, take the key from Ronald there and throw your stock ups, stock down. Everybody's already starting to play. Roy says stock up, linebackers and corners. Ronald says the secondary, stock up. We're seeing some themes. Again, as always, Kendall and I are blind to each other's answers. We don't know what each of us have picked for stock up and stock down. We'll start with the good. We'll start with the stock up. Again, we'll start with our number 2. So Kendall, give me your number 2 group that is trending upwards at the quarter mark of the season here.
My number 2 group is the linebackers. I think the
Okay.
linebackers are playing incredibly well. I think, obviously, Milano hasn't really skipped a beat. I think he's come off everything that he's done the past few years in Buffalo.
He's been undervalued and overlooked I feel from a national
past years.
perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, not
But
this
I
year,
think
but
last year you started to see that national spotlight start to be placed on him, especially on broadcast. You start to see some color commentators be like, yeah, I watched him on all 22. He pops every play.
Yep. And you're getting some of the hyperbole statements of being like, he's one of the best linebackers in the league,
Right.
and arguably the best coverage linebacker.
Right.
And like that being said granted, you've also got national people like Dan Orlovsky saying the Bills have one of the best screen games in football.
Right.
So
hyperbole is
Yes.
very prevalent in this.
But it's cool to
space.
see him get that, shine, even if it may
Yes.
be inaccurate. I do think that's more accurate than saying the Buffalo Bills have one of the best screen games, but I digress.
It is. It probably is. But yeah, so obviously, yeah, Milano's kind of picked up where he's left off. Obviously still improved marginally from last season and seasons before, but I think he looks really good this year in terms of filling the run, in terms of getting in the right gaps, but also shooting that gap. I think he's doing a really good job of, getting his body in between the 2 defenders or his 2 teammates, but then not just getting there positionally, then shooting through there and trying to reduce the amount of yards that the offense is getting on any run play. I think that's
trying to
been a
create
big thing that
negative
I've seen.
plays.
Yeah, it's you do see him. I feel like in the past you used to see Milano either shoot the gap or stay patient and wait for the play to come to him. Now he's living in this middle ground where he's filling that run gap, and then once he feels like he's broken down enough and he's waited long enough, then he shoots through and tries to make a play on it.
Clicks and close.
Exactly. And then obviously everyone's favorite poster child in the linebacker group, Tremaine Edmonds.
Most polarizing man. Well, not anymore. Now that guy is Zach Moss.
Yeah, not anymore. I think a lot of people have quieted down on that, rightfully so. Tremaine has had an incredible start to the season.
A tremendous start.
A tremendous start. I should have used that. That was
believe
poor
you
execution.
Low-hanging
Yeah,
fruit. Just grab it.
yeah,
Just pluck it.
It was
Take a bite.
really bad. So he's done excellent. I think the one play that really screams out to me this past week, there was a boot action towards the bottom of the screen, and he carried, like, he stayed flowing side to side with Lamar as Lamar was rolling out on the boot action. But then at a certain moment, he just knew to get some more depth along with his width, and it took away the deep crosser behind him without even identifying him with his eyes or anything. He just understands the concept. Okay, there's a boot action. He's rolling out to his right. There's probably a deep over behind me or a dig or something behind me that's crossing the field from the backside of the play. And it's going to be, I need to get some depth so I can shrink that passing window down. I think he's been better in that regards. And then obviously what he's been doing in the run game. I think a lot of people slept on what he was doing in the run game even last year and the year before, but I think he's definitely improved on even what he's done the past few years in that regard. Like we talked about last night in the film room, he's attacking these blockers that are coming at him with better angles, either to set up his teammates or set himself up to stack that block, shed it, and make a play. So I think he's he's gotten better in both pass and run defense. And I think it's gone a long way for this defense at the second level. And honestly, I should probably include Teron Johnson. I don't have notes on him, but I probably should include Teron Johnson in the linebacker group.
Very fair. He literally lines up in the box and plays strong side linebacker at times. I'll just go with it now. Linebackers were my number one.
I'll just go with it now. Okay.
Just go with it now. Because it makes no sense to be like, well, let me talk about linebackers later. Like you mentioned, they were my number one, although I wrestled with my 1 and my 2. I just think Edmonds and Milano are playing at such a high level, both versus the run, which you can give some credit to the defensive line for the revamping in terms of personnel and also in terms of a little bit of technique and scheme. Them, we talked about it last night in the film room, them playing a little more gap and a half, occupying blockers and double teams a little bit more, or in the case of Brandon Bryant on that goal line stand, occupying 3 blockers and letting those linebackers to play free. You just see tackles for loss. You see plays in coverage, a multitude of things that, again, I think a lot of people are talking about how the defensive line has unlocked Edmonds a bit and Milano to a degree, but then you also see what they're doing in coverage, and that is all on them. Tremaine Edmonds has had multiple reps this year. Yeah, 13 says it. Both linebackers are on another level right now. You've seen Tremaine Edmonds just have certain reps where he bites on the play action like he's supposed to, because that's what the Bills teach. They don't sit in the grass when they see run action. They take steps forward. They honor the run. He had the first one, maybe it's against the Rams. No, it's against Tennessee. It's against Tennessee. It's on the Jordan Poyer interception that Edmonds gets a piece of, Hyde deflects it, and then Poyer picks it. Edmonds bites on the run, comes forward this way, sees that it's play action, turns to his left, like Zoolander, turn left, locates the deep over, similar to the play you were talking about earlier in Baltimore, where he kind of feels it, locates the deep over, and then takes the angle to cut it off, and he cuts it off. Then he uses his pterodactyl wings to get a piece of it on a good throw from Tannehill, deflects it past the receiver, Hyde deflects it, Poyer intercepts it. There's been multiple reps like that this year where he just, his angle, whether in the run game or in coverage, has been so much better. And that's something for me that's been a huge, huge thing of a huge area of inconsistency for him in his game, in my evaluation of him. Inconsistent angles to the football, usually in the run game more than the pass. But this year, he's taking good angles to the football. And I think a lot of it has to do, with him being cleaner in the run game, from the defensive line. But in coverage, he is just pinpoint location. And he's in that role, in that match coverage role for this Bills defense, where he's got to, be that wall player in the middle, or in the Tampa 2, he's got to carry anybody splitting those safety. Doesn't matter if they're a tight end or if they're a speedy receiver, he's got to carry them. Angles are so important. Hand technique and athleticism and awareness are so important. He's shining like in a variety of ways this year. And Matt Milano is up there with him. Both of these guys, Matt Milano, his average depth of tackle this year is 1.5. Tremaine Edmonds' average depth of tackle is 2.4, which is,
I believe off my head, I think that's already up from last year's numbers.
Both of them are way up. Yeah. Lower, but yes, up in that's better and lower in terms of
up in terms of positivity.
Which you see it on its own, and you're like, oh, okay, that's pretty good. But even more so considering what's asked of them in this defense, because they are a nickel defense, because they are a light box defense, because they are a drop 7 into coverage type of defense. They're usually the conflict defenders. And I'm not just talking like RPOs or things like that. I'm talking the conflict defenders of they have to live in the light and the dark. They have to honor the run and play the run. And they also have to be responsible in coverage in the middle of the field, in arguably the most dangerous part of the field, especially for a variety of players, especially for a game last week against someone like Lamar Jackson, who 40.9% of his throws come in the middle of the field between deep, intermediate, and short. He attacks that middle all day. Their coverage responsibilities in man and zone, their pursuit to the football, their playmaking ability. You're seeing both of them create turnovers. You're seeing both of them knife into the backfield, create tackles for loss, create havoc, whether they're finishing the play and making a tackle or being a disruptor, forcing it to someone else to create a tackle for a loss. They're taking the football away. They're making splash plays. They're sound in coverage in both man and zone. They're making physical, violent, forceful plays on the football in a variety of ways. I'm just hugely impressed with both
Yeah.
of them. I've been big on Matt Milano for a while. If you look at the coverage metrics, he's literally since like 2017, 2018, he's been
Top
one of the
5
best
or
coverage.
something.
Yes. Like he's unreal in man and zone. And I
Mhm.
know some people like to knock him. Like, yeah, but he got beat by Travis Kelce in overtime, so we can't cover
Everyone
anybody.
gets beat by Travis Kelce.
Correct. I'm not here for that narrative. But Tremaine Edmonds really is the big one. I think you're still going to get some people who deny the prophecy of Tremaine Edmonds.
The
but
prophecy that was foretold.
That prophecy that was foretold. Yeah. He's starting to look like that guy that I think a lot of people anticipate. Now, I think a lot of people expected this type of play from him in like year 3, which would have gotten a lot of people off his back, but better late than never. And actually, it's not even late because not even to make this joke, he's still like 14 years old or like whatever he is. It's unreal, the jump that I think he's already taken. And I think a lot of it is mental and the ease of, you see him starting to read and react more. You see him start to just, oh, cool, there it is, bang. Fire my gun, shoot the gap, click and close, detonate. He's
a lot less hesitation.
Yes. The one that really got me too, that I think really clued me in, again, there were several reps against the Rams, but there was, again, that coverage rep against Tennessee that I talked about, and then also a tackle on Derrick Henry. Milano disrupts it and knifes into the backfield and kind of makes Henry stumble a bit, but Henry goes to stiff arm Edmonds. Edmonds chops it down.
I remember that.
Wraps him, and then reaches, as he wraps him up and brings him down forcefully, he reaches around with his left arm and tries to punch the ball out. Like the simultaneous physical and technical nature of that tackle. Yeah. I was just like, is this guy putting stuff together? And we've seen him continue to play solid. Yeah. I think, it was tough for, my number 1 and the number 2 in terms of what position groups are stock up. But yeah, the linebackers, Edmonds and Milano, are just both having phenomenal years and are both, unlocking a lot for this defense. And I think you've seen the Bills be able to weather the storm of Tre'Davious White and Micah Hyde and what's going on in the interior. One, because the guys who have stepped in have played well. You have to give them credit.
Yeah.
But the stars in other areas are picking up the slack. Jordan Poyer, Von Miller, Greg Rousseau, and then Milano and Edmonds, who are not, knock on wood, do not come off the field ever. Yeah. Poyer's missed a game. Milano and Edmonds have been there every game. Groot rotates. Von Miller rotates. Milano and Edmonds don't. They're on the field, knock on wood, almost every single snap. And so, to the moon for both of them right now. Very, 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 very
I know we could do literally a whole show on this, but you think Edmonds has earned his extension? Or do you think there's money available to even do this? Just a quick answer, because I know it's
I would pay him his average annual value now. His average annual value puts him in like the contract range of
like Miles Jack's range, right?
Like the Miles Jack range. And so I will pay what you're getting from Miles Jack. I will pay Tremaine Edmonds. My worry is the level he's playing at. If it continues, I could see someone just being like, yo, bro, you want 20 mil a year, especially if he continues this play and the Bills make a run, like a championship type run. I could see somebody trying to revamp their defense by breaking the bank for Tremaine Edmonds. And I'm not saying that's right. I don't think, even if he has a great year this year, I do not think he should be paid in the realm of the Warners and the Leonards. But given his size, his athleticism, his youth, and also
still potential to grow.
Correct. Like he could see another big contract after this one. And this is also a key point too, that I think people don't also necessarily consider. He's highly regarded amongst other teams and coaches. Yeah. And it's not just like general coach speak. Like you listen to Bill Belichick, you listen to Robert Saleh, guys who know defense, they think Tremaine Edmonds is fantastic. And like, I could see him getting a payday somewhere else. I always wanted Tremaine to stay. I don't want to break the bank for him. I still don't even know if they can.
Exactly.
But if his average annual value right now, which before the season was like 13.4, roughly, I would be very comfortable.
I would jump at 13.4 right now.
Yeah, I would take it because he looks like he's to the moon and it's only going to get higher.
Yeah.
And now we move even higher on your list. I think I know it's going to be number 1 for you. Definitely kicker. But actually, that's not even a joke. Tyler Bass, well, he missed one kick, but he's fine.
He's missed one. Yeah, that's the thing.
Stock down. Terrible. Yeah. Sell. So who's your number 1? Can I guess it?
Yeah.
Defensive line.
Yeah. And it's because I think, like last night, shout out DF Forever on the comment last night in the film room, got my mind turning on this, where I think the linebackers, obviously we talk about it all off season and the idea of getting Tremaine better and a way to do that is get help on the defensive line, keep the linebackers clean at the second level, allow them to play fast, run fast, make plays, all that stuff. So I do think the reason I had linebackers at number 2 is because their stock up has been influenced by the stock up of the defensive line.
That's what tore me, where I was like, but because they've been playing so good in coverage, which is on them,
which
is
is
the reason I kept them
no dependent variables there. It is on them to make plays.
But
I think the defensive line, because of what they've done in pass rushing situations, and then especially what they just showed this last week against the Ravens in run stopping situations, they've been fantastic in all accounts. I mean, in terms of pressures, you see Von Miller and Groot tied for the top at 14 total pressures right now through 4 games, which is just nuts. Combined for 8, and then next to is Boogie and Jordan Phillips at 8. So everyone is getting work in terms of getting to the quarterback. And then even Daquan Jones is getting into the mix. We talked about this offline. Like, this was a signing I don't want to say low on, but I was lower on than I am right now, because I was hype about the Daquan Jones signing because I thought it would elevate Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano in the run game. Daquan Jones has been doing a lot in the pass game. He's been looping a lot on stunts and twists. He's been affecting the quarterback in terms of compressing the pocket, getting interior pressure, not just on those twists and stunt games. He's been doing a lot in terms of pass rush as well. I just think the defensive line has been everything we wanted and more, and I think a lot of it does stem from that root cause of adding another weapon like Von Miller and making those offensive lines and offensive coordinators have to try to reduce his effect as best as they can and game plan for him, which opens up avenues for other guys. And keep in mind, think about how well this defensive line has played. And we've been, struck by injuries at the defensive line, and how much the depth has really shown here. Like Shaq Lawson has stepped up multiple times.
Prince I think Brandon Bryant,
exactly, practice squad players. Epinessa's
the regular depth guys, let alone like the depth guys
of the depth
squad. The depth for the depth,
the money ball level. There's this guy, then there's 3 layers of depth, and then there's this guy.
Nice way to translate it. I like that.
But they've just been fantastic, and I don't want to shortchange the linebackers at all, but I do think both of them obviously impact the games from pass to run. But I think because the defensive line, they're helping each other out in run and pass, where the linebackers, they need some help from the defensive line in the run game. So I think a lot of the defensive line success is really just dependent on other defensive linemen's success. So that's why I kept them as number 1. They've been really everything advertised and more. I think it's been money well spent this past offseason. Probably the first time for Brandon Beane that money has been well spent on the defensive line additions in the offseason.
Like, that's a good point. Like, it's been multiple years. Like, it's like, it was Quentin Jefferson and Vernon Butler and Mario Addison and all these guys who they made, a
concerted effort to be good on the defensive line.
And they just could not. Real quick, I want to answer this question from Steven. He says, running game, whose fault? Scheme, blocking, the backs, who is most culpable? Kendall and I have talked about this in a variety of ways. We both lean more towards it being the offensive line, being an O-line issue than a running back issue. But both are definitely culpable. If I had to put a percent on it, I don't know what you do. I'd probably say like 60-40 O-line, roughly.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more O-line, but not much.
Yeah, I would say I could push it to like 65-35.
Yeah.
O-line. The biggest thing, Steven, is like I've said it so much, but I think it's a really good way to put it. Neither the offensive line or the running backs are good enough to elevate the other. So both have to be right and both have to be both have to be right and both have to be working correctly in order to get things to achieve success. And that's a hard way to win, when you have to have both groups winning in order to have something like positive happen, because neither is good enough to elevate the other. Very good question. Yeah, this defensive line, we talked about it. We broke it down in the film room last night, how they're fitting the run, the violence, the aggression, the physicality, the little bit of gap and a half that they're playing, the ability to generate pressure, this is a great tweet from earlier in the day from Matt Williamson. The 49ers are the only defense that creates a sack at a higher percentage of opposing dropbacks than the Bills. So the Bills are second. They're sacking opposing quarterbacks on 10.2% of their passing attempts. And the Bills have achieved this despite blitzing just 8.8%, the lowest blitz rate in the NFL. So the Bills are sacking opposing quarterbacks at 10.2%, at a 10.2% clip on passing attempts. And they've achieved it despite blitzing just 8.8% at the time, the lowest blitz rate in the NFL. Yeah. They're literally just rushing 4 and playing games, and not even playing games sometimes. They're just like, yo, just go rush.
Straight rush.
And they just rush. That's it. Sometimes Von
or reactive rush, like we saw last night in the film room. Either straight rush, stunt, or just, hey guys, react to what they're giving you and just play ball. And it's working.
Hey, we're playing a game up front. Go execute it. Hey, just go rush. Okay, one of my guys beat his guy. All right, cool. He's in. Hey, just go rush. Oh, this guy stepped inside. You know what? I'm going to make a read in this moment because based on his jab inside, he just took up the tackle on the guard. So let me flow outside. And then, I just walked into a sack. And you're seeing contributions from everyone on the defensive line. Yeah. Like literally anyone they put in, even these practice squad guys, you were seeing positives from the top, so the Von Millers, the Greg Rousseaus, Daquan Jones is arguably the best defensive lineman for the Bills. He leads the Bills in defensive line snap percentage at 66%. Groot and Vaughn are both second at 58.5. Like with all the injuries to the defensive tackles, they've had to lean on Daquan Jones, and he has responded in a variety of ways against both the run and the pass. Physicality, leverage, hand technique, some pass rush ability, playing gap and a half, making tackles, being a force player. Just so much of what you want to see from the interior has been encapsulated in who and what Daquan Jones has been. Mm-hmm. And then you extend it to everybody else. Tim Settle has played well when he's in there. Ed Oliver was in there briefly, but he looked very good. AJ Epenesa's improvement as a run defender really stepped up his game. Boogie Basham looks better this year. The Brandon Bryants, the Prince Emili's, like it just extends to almost everybody on this defensive line. There is something to like about seemingly everyone on this defensive line group. And it's huge. It's why this part of why this Bills defense has been so successful to start the year, because again, if you can get pressure just with 4, that means you drop 7 into coverage and you always have the coverage advantage no matter what. Because even if an offense sends 5 out, right? Even if they just go regular spread and they only block with 5. So 5 offensive linemen plus the quarterback, that's 6. 11 minus 6 is 5. That means at max, they can send 5 out into the routes. Cool, you've got 7 to cover 5. Let alone if they bring 1 less. Cool, you got 7 covering 4 or maybe 7 covering 3. Because you can play games with, bluff and pressure and simulateds and creepers and all these things to take advantage and dictate protection and force the offense's hand. And it all starts because the Bills can win up front with 4 against the pass, but also in their run fits. And yeah, it's a positive domino effect and chain reaction, like you said, with what they're doing up front. Benefits the linebackers, benefits the secondary. They're a huge, patient zero for the success of this Bills defense this year. And they're going to have to be, even when Tre'Davious White comes back, we don't know what Tre'Davious White we're going to get. Micah Hyde is done for the year. That's a huge blow, no matter who replaces him. And, we got to see what that secondary looks like and what that back end looks like. But as of this point, the front 4 and the defensive line in general is just absolutely rolling every single week against the run and the pass. And it opens up and unlocks so much for this Bills defense. So yeah, that stock, I think it was an easy decision for both of us to be like, who are the top 2 position groups? Boom, linebacker, defensive line, pretty easy. Yeah. Absolutely crushing it. And this defense has been phenomenal. And where the offense as a whole has been stuck in the mud at times these last 2 weeks, the defense continues to just pull them through, pull them out, bail them out, continue to make plays. And then hopefully the offense turns things around and we get a nice marriage of offense and defense. Now we go to the frowny face portion of the show, stock down. Kendall, I'm very interested to see I think I know what 2 you're going to go with. So I have a third just so we don't overlap too much.
Okay, cool. I was going to say, I think we're going to be spot on the same with this, even though it was blind for
maybe
4 different position groups.
I figured maybe we'll differ in what's our 1 and our 2, but I think we'll have the same 2, but I do have that third in the holster just to be safe. What's your number 2? Who is your, I guess, second most disappointing position group, if we want to phrase it that way? Yeah, whose stock is trending down the second most for you?
That would be the running back position. And
okay.
Yeah, it's a few things, but I think also we talked about it last night after we dropped out of the film room. when we were in the post show, I talked about how high I was on the running back group coming into this season. Because I believe I ranked them as like my second, like I was second most excited about the running back group in terms
I think you
of
gave
the
them like a
entire
B,
offense.
and I think you gave them like a B+.
Something in that range of like just the group holistically. And they just simply have not met that expectation for me. And obviously a lot of this, and we know the running back position is very dependent on a lot of factors, and the most prominent factor being O-line play. But as we've talked about, and as you've mentioned, that negative feedback loop of if the O-line isn't going to win, you need your running backs to play above the scheme, make someone miss in the backfield, break a tackle in the backfield, bounce it outside if you see a block being missed early, whatever it is. And sure, we've seen that, but we haven't seen it with enough frequency. And I don't know if we have the backs on the roster that can do it with the level of frequency to mask the O-line play.
Very
so
fair.
that's kind of the thing. You're just stuck in this negative feedback loop where you have this personnel and you need to try to maximize it, but you're stuck with what you have, and you can't really maximize it because you also have some struggling O-linemen up front. So I think stock down is the running backs, because even going all the way down to James Cook, man, like I know he hasn't gotten a lot of opportunities.
I feel like this whole group just let you down from like what you initially thought it would be going.
Look, like Motor's been fine. I really like, there's not much to say negatively about Motor, but to say he's just been fine, I feel like is as accurate as you can be. I don't think he's been great. I think good is the best stretch you can get to.
But I think that's also what he like is. Like his ceiling is, but he's a starter. Okay.
But
like,
I would argue you can kind of like push through that ceiling and stretch it a little bit more if O-line play was a little bit better. And you get to see him in open space, and you get to see that dead leg more.
But you could say that for literally any running back, which is why like he doesn't move the needle that much for me. Like
But I think right now that ceiling is being suppressed. It is being stomped down right now, and you're not seeing the best of Motor. So that's the thing, and that goes for all these guys. But yeah, back to James Cook. I mean, obviously, I think a lot of people want to see him. They want to see more of him in this offense, especially if the Bills are trying to pass the ball as much as they are. Let's give some opportunities to check it down to James Cook and see if we can churn out 2, 3, 4 more yards, or even like 10 to 15 more yards after the catch when you're throwing to Cook versus throwing to Singletary. So I want to see that, but every opportunity Cook has had outside of the garbage time against Tennessee has been underwhelming or just mistake ridden.
That's a good way to put it, underwhelming.
Yeah. So it like, and to be fair, like what we saw against Tennessee was inspiring, but it was garbage time and it was against backups with backups. So it's really tough to evaluate that, but the whole group has been underwhelming because sure, like I said, the O-line has let them down on multiple levels. You still want to see them make that play, make a man miss in the backfield. That's like priority number 1 for running backs, make the first man miss. It is tough, granted, to make that first man miss when you're like still at the mesh point. But you'd still like to see it, and you'd still like to see them show some creativity, show some playmaking ability and make something out of nothing. So that's been the biggest, or I guess second biggest disappointment on the offense for me.
They're in my top 2 as well. They are saying is I struggled with who was going to be 2 and who was going to be 1. I'll mention my third at the end. But yeah, they are my 2. Even just again looking at this group as a whole, which is what we are in this exercise here, looking at this group holistically, they are last in EPA per attempt for all running back groups. Like this group as a whole, that's where they are, and it's just. And again, 31st in rushing DVOA. It's just bad. And you're not seeing, whereas last year you saw that broken tackle plus missed tackle, percentage for Singletary being up in the low 20s. This year it's in the 11s. Part of it is because, he's getting pressure early on when he gets the ball. He's getting met like in the backfield. And he's not able to kind of get things going. But then even when he does have the opportunity, he's not succeeding. I think you've even seen in the pass game too, like he'll get a check down in the middle of the field and he's got a one-on-one with somebody coming down on him. And you're thinking like, oh, he's going to make that guy miss. And he gets brought down by the first defender. And you're like, Well, that's very odd.
I mean, he's
then-
always struggled to kind of convert back into that runner from being the pass catcher
Correct.
that has. I mean, obviously, he
James
had
Cook.
very, very, yeah, right. He had very, very low sample size. That was a question coming out of FAU. Like, didn't even get thrown the ball at FAU. And this has all been a work in progress for Motor in the pass game as a pass catcher since he got to Buffalo. And he has gotten better, but he is still limited in that area.
Most definitely. And, you know, I think he's somebody who I've spoken about a lot like this offseason. I think he's a guy who's like above average at everything, but he doesn't have like any 1+ matchup. I thought he did with that broken tackle and missed tackle ability, that elusiveness. It hasn't translated too much this year, but even on Singletary's best day, he's not elevating, you know, a poor offensive line play. And then the issue with this offensive line is on their best day right now, as of now, they're not elevating the running backs. And so it is that negative feedback loop. But the running back group, if we're just focusing on that, disappointing. Like, I think Singletary had some opportunities to do some things. I don't think he's fully capitalized. Cook, we've seen limited work from him, and it's been underwhelming. Moss, I think, has had some really, really positive flashes. You know, that catch and duck under Jalen Phillips on 3rd down, the big run against Miami, a couple, you know, broken tackles and nice runs as well. He does ironically have a higher broken tackle and missed tackle per attempt percentage than Devin Singletary. But he's somebody who needs a little more to kind of help him get, from a blocking standpoint, to get him established and get him going. I honestly think like Moss's best value right now is as a pass protector and being QB friendly on passing downs. That's his best
passing
value.
game impact is actually reigning supreme at this point.
And then that's even more of a headache because, like, well, you should want Cook in on pass downs.
Exactly.
But Moss is more QB friendly onto the backfield and the better pass protector. So it's like, well, we should probably put this guy on the field in those situations. But then they're also keeping Singletary on the field in those situations. And he's not doing a ton. It's just, he is from a volume standpoint. I think he's like the 3rd leading receiver from all the checkdowns and different things. But it's just,
you feel like there's still meat on the bone in terms of the passing impact from running backs.
And I know that the O-line is having a heavy impact on the run game, but I think they're, you know, just looking at the running backs from a run perspective and what they're doing in the passing game from an efficiency standpoint, especially when you watch the film and really evaluate the scheme and structure and the individual player performance. Yeah, it's disappointing. I think to, you know, or underwhelming, I think is the better way to look at it for this position group as a whole. You know, then it's just, again, tied to the offensive line in a variety of ways, but just looking at them in a vacuum as their isolated position group, especially considering what they could have been coming in, given the different skill sets and what they could do at this point right now, I think, their stock is down. Who's your number one? I can pretty much guess it.
Yeah, it's O-line. And it's tough to even like talk about that running back group and say that they're stock down number 2 without really alluding to everything that's, you know, making them number 2. It kind of goes back to the stock up position of I put D-line first because they impact the linebackers being as good as they are. So linebackers were number 2. In this way, I blame the O-line more for the shortcomings from the running backs, albeit the running backs still have their mistakes. So because that the dependent variable in the running back success is the O-line, I have to put the O-line first. And I think also like putting that Dolphins game in there too, and how they struggled in pass protection in that game still also kind of puts this together as them being the biggest disappointment to this part or this point or the biggest stock down. But yeah, it's overwhelmingly to me like what they're lacking in the run game, and whether that means getting more to gap scheme stuff, pin pull, using the crack toss more, whatever it is. I don't know if we have the horses in the stable to do the zone stuff that Cromer wants. And I think we've seen some success, but the inconsistency should be slapping him in the face and telling him like, I think maybe we need to mix it up a little bit more and get to some positions to put all these offensive linemen in area to succeed. Because I think the pin pull, obviously we've talked about it for years now with Mitch Morse and how getting him on the move is
terrific
really
movement center in space. Yeah. And Spencer Brown
and Spencer Brown. Exactly. Like there's so much athleticism on this offensive line, which obviously can still translate to just getting out of your stance and moving people in zone. But for some reason, these guys they work more when they're out in open space, and they just kind of have this target point of there's going to be a defender right here, obliterate him. And that's your job. All right. And then the running back is going to follow you and there's going to be an open hole. For whatever reason, it just seems to make more sense or click for this offensive line. And we saw it towards the tail stretch of the season last year. So
in those gap scheme runs.
Exactly. So I'd like to see that come back a bit, but I don't want to speak too much on the shortcomings of this offensive line because honestly, this stock down segment for the offensive line being number one, we've kind of alluded to it through this entire show.
Agreed. I'm the same boat. They're my number one. I think the one caveat that I have, or encouraging piece, so much about offensive line play, and I've said this on multiple shows as well, so I don't want to hit it again too much, but so much of offensive line play is chemistry based.
Oh, yeah.
And this starting offensive line throughout the offseason, Spencer Brown was banged up, Ryan Bates was banged up, then Roger Saffold missed time. They haven't had a ton of reps together to work together and build chemistry. And I think you really see that in the zone blocking piece where, one of the main staples of zone blocking is those double teams at the first level. And so those guys will, whoever is executing that double team, they both execute that double team. And then you have to feel which one of you is going to climb to the second level. And that takes reps, that takes feel, that takes understanding. You're seeing times where both guys leave the first level and both climb to the second level because they don't know who's going to do what. Mm-hmm. You're seeing a lot of chemistry issues result. So I think as the season progresses, this O-line will get better. It's just a matter of how much they get better and when do they get better. But I think to this point, especially with how the season started against the Rams, you saw successful runs. You saw good pass protection. And I think they've been a better pass protecting group than they have run blocking group. I don't think I'm not tremendously concerned with the pass protection. I would like it to be better, but I'm not like, oh, they're terrible in pass protection.
It wasn't like this point last season. Correct. That's for sure. Yes.
Pass protection was very bad, as was run blocking at this point last year. I don't have that same qualm. I don't think they're a great pass protecting group, but I think they're sufficient. I think they're better than on the run clearly, but I think they're fine overall. But you're seeing guys get beat in that regard. Deion Dawkins is having reps where he just gets worked. And then Saffold will have some letdowns. Spencer Brown, like we talked about, when he gets beat really bad. Bates has had a tough go with things. Even Morse at times has had some bad reps, but I think he's been the most consistent overall. And then, just when it comes to the run game, they're not putting things together. And especially with someone like Aaron Cromer in the mix, who we've championed for his ability to raise floors and ceilings and establish technique and fundamentals, that still gives me hope that as we move forward, things will be okay. As this group continues to gel and gain some chemistry, they'll start to improve. But it is disconcerting to see where they are now as a position group. Just given the expectation, I think. And then even if it's just not even the expectation, you're just evaluating the performance. Like even before everybody went down with injuries or heat in Miami, the offensive line was not playing good. We saw them get no push and give up penetration in the run against Tennessee. We're seeing just a lot of vulnerabilities and deficiencies emerge. I still do have faith in Cromer and in these players. I think they will raise their game to be like a middling offensive line, like we thought they could be. And I don't mean that as an insult or as a slight. If they can just be consistently
top 16,
just be like a top 15 group. That's it. Just live in that range. 1 week be 16, maybe 1 week be 12, maybe 1 week be like 17 or 18. Just stop being,
in the 20s.
Responsible, or being a part of a group that's 31st in rushing DVOA, or having your running backs be fourth in percentage of runs hit at the line of scrimmage at 49.2%. Like, that's wild. The Bills running backs are fourth in runs hit, in the runs where they get hit at the line of scrimmage. 49.2%.
Half the time, pretty much.
Which is crazy. And again, that's not like a volume perspective. It's like, well, they run it a ton, so you're bound to get hit at the line. They don't run it that much. And they're still getting hit at the line. It's unfortunate to see where they are. But I have more faith in the offensive line correcting itself than I do the running backs, even though I have the line at number 1 in terms of stock down and the running backs at 2.
Well, yeah, because we had a lot of hope for what this group could be and what Aaron Cromer could do to this group. I think the evaluation outside of James Cook is all but done with our running backs.
That's it. Who the running back group is, or what the running back group is and who they are individually, other than Cook, they are who they are. Unless they bring in someone else, this is what the grouping is. The offensive line, you can at least be, well, if they gel and do this and that.
Exactly.
The running backs really are who they are, except for Cook. We don't know who he is. The sample size is not there, and the jury is still out. And so I think that's, That's the only thing that creeps in the back of my mind of like why maybe put the running backs 1, because I think the stock might continue to drop, but it should
That's an
improve if the
argument.
O-line. It could make it an argument,
Yeah.
but it should improve if the O-line improves. And again,
Yeah.
regardless, it's where they are after this first quarter of the season, not where we anticipate it going forward. It's where they are right now, and I think both of these groups are trending downward, which is a bit unfortunate. I also think a sneaky dark horse. I could also be persuaded to talk about tight end as being stock down.
Ooh, I thought about this. Yeah.
But the reason I really don't want to too much, so much of it is on the shoulders of Dawson Knox, and he's been hurt. He's had back and hip issues, and like every time he makes a catch, it seems like he has to leave the field for a little bit. He's real banged up. Quentin Morris was banged up, and he missed a game. So I want to reserve some evaluation there because they've really been stricken with just being banged up and not really being able to perform. But we will see where they go from there. Good question from Mike. He says, is the 15th best O-line good enough to win a Super Bowl? I think we need better. If you have a top 5 defense and arguably the best quarterback in the NFL and a top 5 to 7 wide receiver 1 and some good complementary pieces, yes, a average O-line is good enough to get it done. Because again, you got to think too, it's not just that they're average. If they're consistently average, that's fine. You just don't want the ebbs and the flows. You don't want them to grade out being overall 15 because 1 week they're at 10 and 1 week they're at 20 and then it balances to 15. The whole thing is you just need them to consistently be that. If they can operate with consistency, given how strong they are in other areas, yes, you can win a Super Bowl that way. Although it is harder because you need to have a good offensive line. And another issue with the Bills is they don't have functional depth behind the starters. So there's questions about the starting offensive line. There's even more about the 2s and the 3s after that. Yeah. So that is very concerning. And yeah, Black Dragonfly says, yeah, but imagine a top 10 O-line. I know, dare to dream, my friend. Dare to dream. Kendall?
2023 draft, hopefully.
I'm not setting myself up for that. We've been doing that for 2 years in a row and hasn't gotten us anywhere. Kendall, you were a gem on tonight's episode. I appreciate you joining me in this kind of a bit of a revamped disguise coverage episode here with the first, if you missed it, first 20 to 25 minutes, or roughly like 24, 23. I had Christopher Carter on, host of Locked On Steelers, does a whole bunch of work, working for the Steelers newspaper in Pittsburgh. He covers Pitt athletics, like anything and everything that is involved with sports in the city of Pittsburgh. He's on it. He does real quality work.
Excellent.
Yeah, he was tremendous. Had him on in the first 25 minutes, giving some insight into the Pittsburgh Steelers coming into this game. Check that out if you missed it. But then, Kendall, yeah, you rode with me for the heavy majority of this episode with the game-deciding matchups and stock up, stock down. So I want to clap it up for you. I appreciate you joining me tonight after putting in work with me in the film room last night. Yeah, you crushed it. As expected, as anticipated, your stock is up. You have not disappointed, like the O-line and the running backs at this point. But fingers crossed for improvements for them and from them. Thank you very much to everybody who rode with us live here on this episode. The chat was jumping. The questions, the thoughts, the comments, concerns. Oh, that's really nice from Steven. He says, you both do a phenomenal job. Thank you. Appreciate you, Steven. Yeah, the kind words. Thank you folks very much. But just your general presence, the engagement, the back and forth, the questions and engagement with one another, the questions and engagement with us. If we missed anything here in the chat, if there was something you asked that we weren't able to get to in this episode because of everything that we covered, get at us on Twitter. Let me pull down the banner there. I am at pro__ant. Kendall is at Mirsky Kendall. At us, DM us, whatever have you. We will answer your questions, thoughts, comments, concerns fully on the old Twitter. So if we missed anything from anyone, we apologize. Get at us on Twitter. We will answer you back. We are all about that engagement on the old Twitter. If you are watching later, listening later, whatever have you, thank you very much for your view, your listen, your download. Any and every ounce of support is tremendously appreciated for myself and the entire team at Cover One. If you like this episode here on YouTube and you're watching now or watching later, please drop a like on this video. Likes are the lifeblood for YouTube content and really affect the algorithms and the numbers and help us to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. I see more kind words coming in from the chat. So thank you very much for all those as well. I want to pull them up, but I feel corny at a certain point, just pulling up kind things that people say about us or myself. So really appreciate any likes that you guys drop, guys and girls, drop on this YouTube video. If you're listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, please rate and review. Please subscribe. Please subscribe here on YouTube as well to Disguise Coverage. Subscribe to Disguise Coverage on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms. Tell your family and friends and loved ones about how awesome this show and this channel is. Recommend it to them. Make them watch it. Put them in a chair and handcuff them to the chair and hold their eyes open and make them watch for the whole thing. Or if you hate this show, mainly because of Kendall, if you hate this show, tell your enemies and try and ruin their day with it. A view's a view, a download's a download. Any press is good press. For myself, Anthony Prohaska, for my guest tonight earlier, Mr. Christopher Carter from Locked On Steelers and Anything and Everything Pittsburgh, and for Kendall Mirsky, this has been another episode of Disguised Coverage. We hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well, staying safe, taking care of one another, being kind to one another. Black Dragonfly, I see your question about the Bill Slack channel. DM us on Twitter. We will get at you, or leave a YouTube comment here and we will answer your comment on YouTube, whatever is easier for you. As 13 says, smash the like on the way out. That'd be fantastic. Appreciate you folks. Take care of one another. Be kind to one another. We will see you next week. And as always,